Hello and welcome back to the Climate Solutions News podcast. Today we are joined by Duncan Reid, who's Chief Executive of Reset Connect, the exhibition and events company that focuses on climate technology and the sort of wider infrastructure around the climate transition. The London event's coming up in June. Give us the date, Duncan, just so we can get the plug away.
Yeah, 23rd to the 24th of June. If you haven't registered yet, feel free. It is free.
Very good.
Please jump in.
Very good. Very good. Reset Connect obviously gathers, a lot of different businesses, policymakers, regulators together. So, and it's taking place during Climate Action Week this year. So, why don't we kick off and just give us a little bit of background about yourself, Duncan? How did you end up in the role, and then just talk through what Reset Connect is and some of the topic areas that you're going to be covering this year.
Yeah, so I've done events for 25 years, something like that. Before this, I was working for kind of one of the top three global events companies. New York had a big climate week. London didn't have one. And at the time in sort of 2019, the UK was about to get COP. And the London mayor kind of lost the bid to Glasgow, and it kind of obviously went to Scotland, was a great success. But London wanted to have this kind of, between the COPs every year in the summer, this kind of regular meeting point for the sector to come together between the COPs to sort look at what had happened over the last year and try and drive some meaningful action for kind of the year ahead. It started off. Really we started to get kind of traction after COVID. It was like, I think the first year there may have been 30 small events. London Climate Action Week's like 500 plus events now. And Reset Connect has kind of grown. Reset Connect London's grown to be the sort of main centrepiece on the Tuesday, Wednesday. Last year had just under 7,000 attendees, and this year currently on track to beat that. So.
Very good, very good. And you're obviously playing an increasing role in climate finance infrastructure as well. And with green investment central to the event's proposition, tell us a little bit about how the format's kind of generating measurable deal flow and how it's evolved to support that.
Yeah, I think when we set the event up 5 years ago, I kind of looked at the fintech sector. And there's a big event in the fintech space that is, it's been around for over 10 years now, 15 years nearly. And I looked at that and thought, actually, the way that takes the investors, the kind of startups and scale-ups, and the end user who might buy the products and bring them all together, actually, there's going to be an opportunity to create something like that in the climate space, particularly if we want to kind of speed up the deal flow. Now, obviously, in the fintech space, most of the money was actually coming in kind of at the end, early VC, seed, pre-seed level. Obviously now they're up to Ds and Es and Fs and Gs in the fintech space. And I could just see something similar happening in climate. I think the big difference with climate is, though, it's not just a kind of VC play. It is a big institutional play as well, because obviously if the UK is all on fire, all underwater, people don't need pensions. So the big institutional investors have got a vested interest in this. I think coming into COP, the fintech space was worth, just before the UK got COP, in London, fintech was worth about 11 billion. In the US, was worth about 40 billion. The climate tech space, when we came into COP, was like 1.4 trillion of assets may be affected by climate. So actually, the size of the opportunity, I think, is significantly bigger than that fintech piece. But there's a lot of vested interests that are trying to, stop the climate movement. They've had that since, Greenpeace started doing stuff in the 70s. I think the sort of amounts of carbon in the atmosphere are much, much greater than they were, when I was born, which is a long time ago. So we've tried to build an event that really kind of fast tracks that money as much as possible. I think you'll see with the stuff that's happening in the Strait of Hormuz at the moment that actually the need to move to kind of renewable energy is even greater than it was when we went into the kind of, the spike in oil prices in Ukraine. And I think, John Elkington was one of our keynotes at the event last year. His Substack this week is talking about how we're moving from soft sustainability into hard sustainability, where we've just got to do it now. And I think Chris Stark in the government, who runs the Mission Control 2030 project, he has that same view. We've got to get off the oil and gas and get to renewables by 2030. And that creates big opportunity. I think deal flow's probably not been, it looked like it may have softened towards the end of 2025. But there's still over 10,000, deals that were done in 2025, up from 9,000 in 2024 and less in 2023. And our event really tries to bring together all those different stakeholders. It looks to bring together early stage investors, whether looking to put in 50 grand or 250 grand, up to those guys who've got a ticket size of 20 million, 100 million plus.
Yeah, it's interesting because 2025, confounded expectations. We did a piece a couple of weeks ago on Climate Solutions News about, it was a boom year, unexpectedly, but things seem to have fallen off the cliff in Q1 2026, both right across the world, in the UK and Europe, and in the US. So, with those investors and institutions coming to the event, are you getting a sense of reticence, or is everyone just proceeding, gung ho?
I think there's definitely, there's, capital moves around, doesn't it? So I do think there would have been some big US investors who were pushing the renewables piece quite hard. I think the current administration in the US, is not as favourable about renewables as Biden was. They've pulled apart the IRA and stuff like that. So, I do think that obviously has a knock-on effect because, BlackRock and Larry at the top suddenly doesn't want to be seen to be putting money into it because he's going on trips to China with Trump. So I do think, you see money move out of some of those kind of really big funds that may have been investing in renewables. But if you look at all the kind of local government pension schemes, if you look, and not just in the UK, but across the world, maybe not in the US, but certainly in Canada, these pension funds do care about like what planet they're going to give to their kids, and people are not going to be paying pensions into these pension funds if they don't have jobs and so on. So I think there's lots of part of the reason why we're called Reset is because you could just see that there was going to be a big reset where some of that kind of traditional money and some of those traditional funds was going to move into some different places. But I don't think it's just the investment sector that's having a reset. It's energy, it's nature, it's regeneration, it's the tech space, it's AI. There's huge kind of resets in every business that, as we kind of go through this decade and head up to 2050, the way we operate has got to change.
Well, we agree with Reset. The company that owns Climate Solutions News is called Reset Media Group, so we fully appreciate appreciate that too. There, just to be clear, there's no connection between Reset Connect and Reset Media. It's just a happy coincidence.
Yeah.
Let's move to like the importance of London and talk about that. Clearly, you have other events in elsewhere in the UK, but you started off in London. That's the biggest event. What do you think your role? What do you think the role of London is in this climate tech ecosystem, and how important is it compared with other places?
Yeah, London's always been a big multicultural city going back, 2,000 years, and it's brought together lots of different kind of communities and stakeholders, and that's part of London's strength. London's other big strength is obviously the city and the amount of kind of both new and old money in the city. And, some of those old family offices, they want to invest in the future for their kids and their kids' kids. They see the opportunity there. I think the institutional investor side see that. And I think on the kind of the newer guys see an opportunity in climate as well. So London brings together all those stakeholders, I think, and whether it's the kind of investment community, it's one of the biggest cities in the world. The mayor, Sadiq Khan, last year was the chair of C40, which is this big kind of global, like city charter. Because actually, as the world kind of moves, forward and tries to hit some of these carbon reduction targets, it's really the cities who take a big lead on this. Whilst some countries might be pulling out of the Paris agreements or reining back their commitments, it's going to be the big cities in the world, whether that's New York or California, who kind of drive a lot of this forward. So London's obviously kind of, a key player in that space. We have a partnership with London and Partners at the event. They're one of our big strategic partners. They have a whole load of programs for kind of startups and scale-ups that the city does. So you get this really good mix of, kind of institutional capital, new capital, and also a really good kind of thriving startup and scale up ecosystem. And then I talked about the kind of three elements that make up the event. Also, you get all of these, potential users or buyers of the technology who come to the event. Our lineup this year has already got, kind of everyone. I mean, we've got, if you look at the exhibitor list, it's literally an A to Z of companies in this space, from, Asahi, like huge, great international drinks company, all the way through to Zero, who are kind of a carbon reporting platform. So you get this really good mix of the really big, large corporates who have budgets to, to try some of these products out, to do first of a kind, all the way through to the sort of the smaller businesses who've got, good products. And that, I think, London over the last 5 years has given the opportunity for the event to kind of grow. And a lot of these businesses, when we started the show and the first one in 22, they were doing MVP, minimum viable products, or proof of concepts. And now these companies are like Series A, B, C, and they've kind of grown with the event.
Let's come back to the regional question afterwards. You touched on the exhibitors who are coming and the type of technologies that you're seeing there. Okay, so let's give us a bit more flavour around those. What do you take from the lineup of exhibitors in terms of indicating where climate tech generally is going? Which are the sectors that you see thriving and having most interest among all the different stakeholder audiences?
Yeah, I think even with the kind of the backtracking from in the US, like a lot of those big US headquartered companies are still doing, they're still active in this space, as in the corporates looking to decarbonise. And I mean, all across Europe, Europe's the absolute powerhouse of this globally, followed, I think, probably by China. I mean, China as an individual country is probably leading on it, but if you look at the amount of companies in Europe who are kind of looking to do this, I think there's a kind of considerable amount there. I think so I got so I think the exhibitors that we have at the show, obviously what they're keen to really do is showcase the solutions they've got. Many of those visitors to the event, the kind of key driver for them really is energy. It's either they're either looking to build microgrids or sort out PPAs or put solar panels on their factory, or they're looking to buy cheaper energy, and that's kind of a key driver for the event. So the energy sector is definitely something that's kind of grown quite a lot. Obviously the tech and AI part of the event is huge. There's the technology solutions, whether you're kind of Dell or Microsoft, who are both at the event, through to some of the kind of smaller companies who have still got like big Series B investments like Sapiens, who've got really good tech solutions. That AI is now absolutely everywhere in the industry. And I think our keynotes on the first day, and we've announced this week our keynotes. Our keynotes on the first day are looking at how how we can manage the grid more effectively to reduce those kind of some of those loads. And these solutions just weren't there, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, when people turned their kettle on at half time, or halfway through Emmerdale or Coronation Street or whatever, there'd be a big surge on the grid, and we'd just turn up that coal-fired power plant to generate more electricity for those people. Now, actually, all that can be managed through battery storage and effective use of like where it is. And the exhibitors across the event, help companies do that. So energy is obviously a big piece. Tech and AI are a big piece. One of the other kind of emerging sectors has been nature. We've seen quite a lot of sort of nature projects at the event, and corporates are looking to invest in that space as well. One of our exhibitors is a company called Ogra, and they basically take plastic bottles out of the ocean, and they've got fishermen around the world kind of doing that. And they've obviously got a nice tech dashboard, so you can see what products have, how much has been taken out of the ocean. But if you're a corporate and you manufacture things that still go out in plastic bottles, or you had stuff that 10 years ago went out in plastic bottles, taking some of the bottles out of the ocean is quite good. So it's a nice mix of kind of the technology solutions, which are very advanced Series A, B, C type of investments, all the way through to, planting trees and kind of taking plastic bottles out of the ocean. It has a really good mix. One of the guys who's been at the event since the first edition, started off with an Innovate UK grant, has grown loads and loads. They're called Magical Mushroom. They do a polystyrene replacement that they can sell into anyone who basically has white goods. So you get all these different technology solutions and all these different products on display at the event, which just makes for kind of a really good showcase of exhibitors. And I think you mentioned about the regional piece a few months ago. We also did an event up in Leeds, and it actually had a very different mix of exhibitors to even the London event, which was good to see. I think, in the north, there's obviously a huge kind of reindustrialisation piece of work that's going on across most of those northern cities, and it was great to see the mix of exhibitors who are looking to move, skills maybe that they had in textiles into kind of this space. And obviously, we know that Scotland's always had a lot of kind of offshore wind, and seeing how that skill set is developing over the last few years has also been good to watch.
Yeah, it's the sort of growth of the industrial clusters in each of the different areas of the UK seems to really started innovation in different sectors. Whether it's
Desno's probably had a large part to play in that. They came out with a thing called Exit, which was basically kind of driving early stage investment using the kind of Innovate UK grant system to sort of drive investment into that space. And we're kind of reaping the rewards now that 10 years later, there's a lot of really good kind of products on display at our event in London that, have started out kind of in that space, and lots of corporates buying them. Our stages are kind of full up with, every stage has got some fantastic kind of speakers and exhibitors there, really driving kind of what it is that this community is up looking to do.
Yeah. I'd like to just touch on policy and policy confidence. Obviously, things are febrile in politics in the UK at the moment, and we don't really have a view on what the long term is going to look like.
They say a week's a long time, don't they? I think a day's a long time.
Exactly. But, as it stands at the moment, the UK's net zero framework remains largely intact. What are you hearing from exhibitors about what they want to hear from policymakers and regulators, both at the event and more broadly, to keep the market buoyant and to keep us on track?
Yeah, I think it's just stability. I think 5 years ago, when some of the Desno's money was helping these early stage startups, it kind of gave them the initial sort of lifeline that they were after. I think obviously what they want now is kind of stability to know that, net zero is something that we're still aiming at, and we're still looking to decarbonise, and we're still looking to improve the grid, and we're still looking to, build out kind of energy security and so on. I think the kind of some of the key language now, and this is the Strait of Hormuz has definitely led to this, but I think energy sovereignty is going to be something that's going to start getting talked about a lot more. I think relying on other countries to produce some of our energy, or even some of our kind of rare earth minerals, is obviously going to become, more and more. We're not going to want to do it. We're going to want to own that piece ourselves, I think. And I think the exhibitors really want to know that they're on, that the course we're on is actually going to be, the course that they're all doing. I think reform obviously have got a small part of the base, 12% of the electorate are kind of voting for reform, but actually there's a significant amount, there's 50, 60, 70 or whatever it is that are actually not in that. And I think sometimes in politics, you just listen to that voice shouting on the right and actually forget the centre or some of the left. But again, back to just like the commercial economic opportunity here in climate tech, regardless of the politics, solar is significantly cheaper than solar and storage combined. It's significantly cheaper than oil and gas. So whether it's about energy security, there's ultimately that kind of pure economic piece just wins, I think, and that's what we try and do with the show. Show companies that you can actually, if you have your own energy and your own kind of battery backup and your own solar, it's going to be cheaper than buying it from somewhere else.
I mean, you've mentioned them a couple of times, but the grid has a lot of a big role to playing this, and they perhaps haven't stepped up or enabled the energy transition as fast as everyone would like. I mean, the grid connectivity seems to still be suffering from massive delays. Are they speaking at the event? Are they going to be explaining what's going on?
It's actually, I mean, like before I did Reset, I actually ran a load of energy events, and I mean, it's very, very interesting. And the problem is that the UK planning laws, if you go back, 10, 15 years, just we didn't set it up properly in the first place. And actually, give Ed Miliband some credit. When he's come in, he's actually looked at what some of the problems are, and he's brought NESO in to kind of, arm's length government. And they've gone through. They had thousands and thousands of people who said, I want to put solar on my field and put an application in. And the problem is you effectively had gridlock in the planning application process to connect generation assets onto the grid. So you have to go through all these thousands and thousands of applications and realise that, it's a farmer in Cornwall. He's nowhere near the grid. He doesn't know how to put renewables on his land and work out which ones are the real ones and not real ones. Actually, now that kind of whole EPC developer community in the UK is really, really strong. AR7, which was a whole lot of kind of offshore wind and onshore wind, which was the last round, again, much better. We've got more coming on stream this summer as well. So, I think NESO actually, bearing in mind the kind of the cards they were given when they set out, I think they've made a dramatic improvement. I support Liverpool for my sins, and when Klopp came in, the team that he inherited was absolutely rubbish. And over a period of 5 years, he managed to, win the Champions League and the league and all the rest of it. And you could say Arteta at Arsenal's done a similar thing. He's picked up this team and through incremental wins has managed to get them after a couple of years to potentially, winning both the big trophies. And NESO are in a similar position. They've picked up something that's very complex with thousands and thousands and thousands of people, theoretically trying to connect to the grid and work out actually where the ones are that we need to connect and so on. But it's complex. You're moving from a 100-year-old energy system to something new in 5 years. There are going to be challenges with it, but we need to get off oil and gas. That's the bottom line.
Well, let's hope that NESO can put the figurative ball in the back of the net and improve the system. So thank you so much, Duncan. Give us the website again where people can register to come to the event.
Yeah, reset-connect.com. Very similar to your parent company, but not connected. Yeah, reset-connect.com. It's the largest event at Climate Week this year. 500 speakers, 300 exhibitors, about 7,500 attendees. Hopefully you too. So.
Very good. Duncan Reid, Chief Executive of Reset Connect. Thank you very much.
Thanks.